Good afternoon, class. My name is Mr. Brown, and today we're going to be working on some strategies to help you enter the SATs with confidence. Now, unlike many other tests, the SATs are not a test of your background knowledge, but rather they're looking at your reading comprehension and your vocabulary. Therefore, this is not a test that you can study a lot of content for. Instead, to approach the SATs successfully, you need to practice a few strategies to the test taking. Many different topics are going to be covered in the SATs, some of which you will not be familiar with. But not to worry, all the information that you need to answer the questions are right there on the test. So today we're going to be looking at two different sections of the SATs. First we'll look at some sentence completion questions, and next we'll look at the section on reading comprehension. Now, we're going to start with the sentence completion. Many students seem to think that the sentence completion section is an easier section than many others because the questions themselves are quite short. That's not necessarily the case though, because oftentimes these questions contain very difficult or confusing vocabulary. So in order to approach these questions and this whole section in a way that will ensure that you have success, we're going to go over three main strategies. Once we go over the strategies, then we'll look at some practice questions and we'll do them together. So our first strategy that we're going to look at today is that you should always use a pencil to help you read the questions. This means that while you're reading through the question or the information section, you're circling keywords and phrases, and you're identifying important words like but or though, which might show contradictions in your sentence that you need to complete. Next, before you look at the options given in the multiple choice section, try to answer the question, try to fill in the blanks with your own words. Now this can be something as simple as simply saying an adjective that is positive. If that's all you have, it at least helps you with our next step, using process of elimination. If you have some idea from the word that you came up with yourself of what type of word should fill the blank, that'll help you to eliminate all of the wrong answers. So let's look at our first example. This is number 3. Because of the blank effects of the hot springs, tourists suffering from various ailments flock to the village's thermal pools. Now, first off the bat, we'll use a pencil to help us read. We'll identify the keywords, the things that are important in this sentence. So, because of the blank effects of the hot springs, tourists suffering. Suffering really jumps out at me there as an important word. So the tourists are suffering from various ailments, sounds a bit medicinal, and they flock where? To the thermal pools. Okay, so we have suffering from ailments, so therefore people go to the thermal pools. Now, before looking at the options that were given, what can we find in that blank? Well, I would think it would be because of the good effects, the positive effects of those hot springs, and that's why people are going to thermal pools. If they're suffering from ailments, maybe it has something to do with medicine or medicinal effects. So now let's go on to the process of elimination. Let's look at each of our options first and see if we can eliminate any of them. Option A is succulent, the succulent effect of the hot springs. Well, that doesn't, although succulent is a positive adjective, it doesn't really fit what we're going for here. Succulent is usually reserved for describing foods or things that are delicious and juicy. Next option, B, redolent. Now, here's an example of some difficult vocabulary. Don't feel too badly if you don't know the word redolent. Now, I myself had to look it up, and it means strongly reminiscent or suggestive of something, something that reminds you of something. So again, I don't think that quite fits. So we can eliminate the first two. Now, an important point to make here is that just because you don't know the meaning of a word does not mean that it's incorrect. So don't necessarily eliminate an option just because you don't know the meaning of it. Next, we have cerebral. Cerebral has to do with thinking or thoughts, so again, doesn't really fit in. Excuse me. Next up, we have mandatory. Well, you wouldn't really describe the effects of hot springs being mandatory. That's something that you must do, that someone is forced to do. So that only leaves us with one option left, option E, which is therapeutic. Therapeutic fits in with what we said should be in the blank. It's a positive adjective, and it has something to do with medicine or medicinal effects. So the answer to 3 is E, therapeutic. Excellent. Let's try another one. Let's skip over to question 6. So once again, following our steps, use a pencil to help you read. So let's look for the keywords here. The guest speaker on Oprah Winfrey's talk show offended the audience by first blank them and then refusing to moderate these blank remarks. So the keywords that jumped out at me were offended the audience. The main idea of this passage is that the audience in Oprah Winfrey's talk show has been offended by something that the guest did. Okay? So answer in our own words. So what did he do to them? Well, by first offending them or doing something negative to them that would cause them to be offended, and then refusing to moderate these blank remarks. Well, that second blank, again, has a negative connotation. So both blanks, the first one, I imagine, is a verb, kind of a negative verb, and the second one is a negative adjective. So, we have some clues now to what they are: negative verb, negative adjective. So now let's go through the process of elimination. So, option A. The guest speaker on Oprah Winfrey's talk show offended the audience by first flattering them and then refusing to moderate these commendable remarks. Well, both of those words don't really fit. Flattering is a positive adjective, means to say nice things about a person. It's hard to see why an audience would be offended by that. And finally, commendable is something praiseworthy. So that doesn't really fit. So the second option, haranguing and intemperate. Well, those are both quite negative words. Haranguing meaning to lecture in an aggressive or a very critical way, and intemperate meaning kind of excessive or extreme. So far B is looking like a good choice. Maybe next to B we'll put a check mark. Now, here's where many students make a mistake. Just because B seems to fit does not mean that you shouldn't look at all of the rest of the options. It's very important that you go through all of the options listed, because you're not only looking for the correct answer, but rather the most correct answer. So let's go back to C. So option C has praising and radical. Well, praising is, again, quite a positive verb. I don't think that many people would be offended by being praised. So I don't think that that works. D, oh, this is looking good. Enraging. So, well, he offended the audience by first enraging them? Sure, why not? Enraging is quite a negative verb. And how about the second one? Conciliatory. Now, again, this maybe is a word that you haven't encountered before. It's another difficult piece of vocabulary. Conciliatory means peacemaking or intended to pacify. So that doesn't fit with how that second blank should be a negative adjective. So we're going to put D aside as well. And finally we move to option E, accommodating and indulgent. Now, once again, those are a verb and an adjective with quite positive connotations. So now we go back to our first choice, which was B. And B is the correct answer. Excellent work, everyone. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to move on to the reading comprehension section of our test. Now, in many ways, the reading comprehension section, the approaches that you should take are similar, but the steps of our process are in a slightly different order. So, once again, it's all about reading, going through slowly, looking at all of your options, and ensuring that you can find the best possible response. So, the first step to our reading comprehension section, and it may seem a little bit backward, but it's to read the question first. Now, rather than reading the long passage or passages that are attached to the questions, you should just read the questions first. Not necessarily looking at the options that are given, but actually the questions themselves. The reason for this is that it may help you while you're reading the passages to have in the back of your mind the type of information that the questions are going to be asking you for. So, after reading the question first, then you should read the entire passage or passages that you're given, and just like in our sentence completion, use a pencil to help you out. Underline key words, paraphrase difficult sentences in the margins, circle ideas that maybe you have from those questions that you've already read. But the important thing is that while you are reading and using your pencil, note down the information that you recognize that needs to be used to answer the questions. But don't stop there. Continue and read the entire passage, because oftentimes you'll find information needed for your question throughout the entire passage. After doing that, once again, try to answer in your own words or give yourself some clue as to what the answer is, because oftentimes you'll be very close to getting the correct answer by yourself, and you don't want to be intimidated or distracted by some of the different options that are given there in the multiple choice section. And finally, go back to our process of elimination, where we look at all of the options given to us and select the one that fits best with the question. So, let's start with question 9. Read the question first, and I'm going to read it without looking at any of the options given. So, in lines 2 to 8, the author of passage 1 mentions activities that suggest dolphins what? Okay. So now we know when we're reading through lines 2 to 8 that we're looking for some information about the actions or the activities of dolphins and what those activities might suggest. So let's read through lines 2 through 8. If we were doing this in the normal way, we would read the entire passage. But in the interest of time, let's just look at lines 2 through 8 of passage 1. So, studies show that dolphins are able to understand sign language, solve puzzles, and use objects in their environment as tools. Scientists also believe that dolphins possess a sophisticated language. Numerous instances have been recorded in which dolphins transmitted information from one individual to another. A recent experiment proved that dolphins can even recognize themselves in a mirror, something achieved by very few animals. So, now going through with a pencil, we can pull out some important sections. So, we have dolphins understand sign language, puzzles, use objects, a sophisticated language, okay? And there's an experiment where they recognize themselves in a mirror. So, all of these key words have to do with activities that are showing that dolphins are quite intelligent. When you say they're doing a number of activities, they're able to perform a number of tasks that, I don't know very much about dolphins, but a number of tasks that it seems to me are very human-like, things that we associate with the intelligence that humans have. So that's what I think that these activities suggest. So let's go on to our last step then, our process of elimination, and we'll look at the actual options given. So in lines 2 through 8, the author of passage 1 mentions activities that suggest dolphins, A, are unusually sensitive to their environment. Well, there wasn't much talk about the dolphin's sensitivity to the environment around them, so maybe we'll put that aside. About B, that dolphins do not generally thrive in captivity. Now again, there's nothing mentioned in the passage about how successful dolphins are living in captivity. So let's put that aside too. That C, they have a unique type of intelligence. Now that's interesting. All of those activities that we listed above, the sign language, the puzzles, the sophisticated language, those do show a kind of intelligence, don't they? Whether that intelligence is unique, I'm not sure, but we'll put a question mark next to that one. C seems like a pretty okay option so far. D, that they are uncommonly playful animals. Well, lines 2 through 8 don't suggest anything about how playful dolphins are, just the type of intelligence that they have. So finally, let's move on to option E. They have skills usually associated with humans. Now that's something that we had come up with before together, that they can do all of these activities, they can perform all these tasks that suggest that they are quite intelligent, and usually those types of intelligences are associated with humans. So if we compare options C and option E, we see that it says two different things. They have a unique type of intelligence. Unique means that they are different from all others. So options C and E cannot both be correct, because question E talks about skills that are usually associated with humans. So if these skills, this intelligence, is usually associated with humans, that means that dolphins do not possess a unique intelligence. For that reason, we're going to stick with option E as our final answer, and that is the correct answer. So thank you all very much for joining me today, and I look forward to going over more strategies in our next class. Thank you.